I want you to close your eyes for a second.
Uh.
We're going to step back in time.
Oh, I love doing this. Setting the scene.
Right. So it is Thursday, August 4, 1892. You are standing in Fall River, Massachusetts.
And it is hot.
Oh, it is completely sweltering. It's the morning, but you wouldn't know it from the temperature at all. It's that oppressive, like, totally still heavy August heat.
The kind that just sits on you.
Exactly. It doesn't just warm the air, it sits on the city like this physical weight.
Yeah.
And you can hear the sounds of the morning moving through this really thick air. You've got the harsh clatter of horse carts rolling over the uneven cobblestone streets. Down by the water, there is this relentless, rhythmic, mechanical hum. It's a New England mill town, and it's already hard at work. Thousands of looms are just shaking the brick buildings.
It sounds like a totally normal, stifling, deeply ordinary Thursday.
It really does. But then a screen door swings open at 92 2nd Street.
Okay.
A woman stands there in the doorway. She's 32 years old. She's plain dressed with this pale, square face.
And she's about to change history.
She is. And her voice, when she speaks to the neighbor across the fence, it's highly controlled, but incredibly urgent. She says, "Someone has killed father."
Wow. I mean, it is one of those incredibly rare historical moments where a single sentence effectively rips the fabric of a community completely in half.
Yeah, totally.
The reality of that morning in 1892 didn't just shock Fall River, it permanently altered the American cultural landscape.
We are stepping into what is arguably the ultimate locked room mystery today.
The big one.
The big one. And I know you, listening to this deep dive right now, you aren't here for the cartoonish nursery rhyme version.
No, we are getting into the real stuff.
Exactly. You want to understand the actual mechanics of history.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to push past the folklore. We want to examine the cold, hard physical evidence.
Or lack thereof in some cases.
Right. The limitations of 19th century forensic science and the intense social psychology behind what is still, honestly, the most fiercely debated verdict in American legal history.
Because when you look at the raw data of this case, you are confronted with an incredibly savage double murder.
Yeah.
And it happened inside a house that was entirely locked from the inside.
Which is crazy.
It is. And at the time of those murders, there were only 2 other living people inside the home.
Just 2.
Right. And a jury of 12 men eventually listened to the evidence and deliberated for, well, little over an hour.
Barely an hour.
Barely an hour before returning a verdict of not guilty, yet 134 years of criminological study points in a completely different direction.
It's wild. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to understand how that massive disconnect happens.
How a jury looks at an apparently obvious puzzle and refuses to put the pieces together.
Exactly. You cannot start with the murder weapon. You have to start with the environment that forged the people involved.
You can't understand an explosion of this magnitude without first examining the pressure cooker.
I like that, the Victorian pressure cooker.
Yeah, so in 1892, Fall River was not just a mill town, right? It was known as the Spindle City.
Right.
It was an absolute powerhouse of textile manufacturing. I mean, second only to Manchester, England.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that big.
Huge. And that specific economic engine created a city of violent extremes.
Well, I was actually looking at the socioeconomic data for Fall River from that era, and it is staggering.
The divide is just massive.
It is. You have this entrenched, incredibly wealthy Yankee elite who own the mills, the banks, and the real estate. And then you have tens of thousands of immigrant laborers, largely Irish and French Canadian, working 14-hour days in these deafening, lint-choked factories.
And living in very crowded tenements.
Right. It was an absolute powder keg of class tension.
Right.
And right near the top of that Yankee elite hierarchy sits Andrew Jackson Borden.
But Andrew Borden is really an anomaly among the elite.
How so?
Well, he wasn't born into old money. He didn't inherit a shipping fortune like some of the others. He actually started out quite poor.
Oh, okay. So he was self-made.
Very much so. He built his wealth through decades of ruthless, disciplined, almost obsessive accumulation.
Oh, obsessive is a good word for it.
He started as an undertaker, moved into real estate, bought up commercial properties, and eventually became the president of the Union Savings Bank.
And he was on the board of some mills too, right?
Yes, a director of several local mills. So by the summer of 1892, his net worth was estimated at roughly $300,000.
Which doesn't sound like much now, but...
Right, but to put that into modern terms, you are looking at something easily north of $10 million today.
$10 million.
Okay.
Which brings us to the great paradox of Andrew Borden.
The frugality.
The extreme frugality. If you have $10 million today, you live in a house that reflects that.
Of course.
You have climate control. You have a high-end security system. You have luxury.
Yeah, comfort.
But Andrew Borden was famously almost oppressively frugal. I mean, his peers, the other wealthy men of Fall River, all lived up on the hill.
Right, the fashionable, affluent neighborhood.
The sprawling Victorian mansions, the manicured lawns. But Andrew refused to move there.
He wanted to stay in the flatlands.
He kept his family in a conspicuously modest, cramped house down in the flatlands at 92 2nd Street, right near the noisy business district.
And modest is almost an understatement when you actually look at the floor plan of this place.
It's bizarre.
It really is. In 1892, a man of his immense wealth would absolutely have had modern amenities. But Andrew refused to pay for indoor plumbing.
Wait, a millionaire with no indoor plumbing?
None. The house had no indoor bathroom, just a water closet in the basement and a privy in the backyard.
That is just miserable.
And there was no central heating either. They relied on individual coal stoves in the rooms.
Wow.
But perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of 92 2nd Street was its bizarre architectural layout.
Oh, the hallways, or lack thereof.
Right. It was an old structure that had been converted from a two-family tenement into a single-family home. Because of this, it had no hallways upstairs.
None at all.
None. The rooms simply connected directly to other rooms.
Okay, I want to give you, the listener, an analogy to help picture what it was actually like to live in that house.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine for us today.
It is.
So,
It wasn't like a modern home where you can retreat down a corridor to your private sanctuary. It's like living in a submarine.
a submarine, yeah.
There is no going to your room to cool off. Every single physical movement you make requires navigating around the breathing bodies of the people you live with.
You're just constantly in each other's space.
Literally, if someone wants to get from the front of the house to the back, they have to walk right through someone else's bedroom. You are constantly in each other's domain.
And now put 5 adults into that submarine.
5 adults who don't even like each other.
Exactly. Let's look at the inhabitants of that enclosed space. You have Andrew, who is 70 years old, stern and unyielding.
Right.
You have his second wife, Abby, who is 64. Then you have Andrew's 2 adult daughters from his first marriage, Emma, who is 41, and Lizzie, who is 32.
And the maid.
Right. Finally, you have the 26-year-old Irish immigrant maid, Bridget Sullivan. That is 5 adults forced to share a suffocating physical space.
While simultaneously maintaining massive emotional walls.
Yes. The psychological friction of that daily existence would just be exhausting.
And the friction wasn't just like generalized annoyance. It was specific, and it was documented.
A real inciting incident.
Yes, the match that lit the fuse. And this happened 5 years earlier in 1887.
The house transfer.
Right. Andrew made a financial decision that completely ruptured whatever fragile peace existed in that household. He quietly purchased a house and transferred the deed to Abby's half-sister as a gift.
Which was a huge deal to the daughters.
Massive. Now, Andrew had previously helped Lizzie and Emma's family members, but to the sisters, this was entirely different. They were acutely aware of their father's extreme stinginess.
Oh, they knew how tight he was with money.
So to see him freely hand over property to their stepmother's family, that wasn't a gift. That was a direct, existential threat to their rightful inheritance.
Because from the sisters' perspective, their father's wealth was the only security they had in the entire world.
They couldn't just go out and get jobs.
Exactly. To see it being siphoned off to Abby's relatives triggered a permanent Cold War in the house. The hostility became tangible.
It really did.
Following that 1887 property transfer, Emma and Lizzie made a conscious, coordinated decision to completely sever any familial warmth toward their stepmother.
And keep in mind, Lizzie was only 5 years old when Andrew married Abby.
Right. Abby effectively raised her.
But after the real estate dispute, Lizzie and Emma stopped addressing her as mother.
They formally demoted her.
They demoted her. They referred to her exclusively as Mrs. Borden.
Which is so harsh.
That level of passive aggression requires so much energy to maintain. I mean, they even refused to eat meals with Andrew and Abby.
Right.
In a house with no hallways where you can hear everyone breathing. The 2 daughters actively coordinated their schedules to avoid sitting in the dining room at the same time as their father and stepmother.
It's exhausting just thinking about it. Which brings us to the psychology of Lizzie herself.
Yes.
A 32-year-old unmarried woman in Victorian New England was in a very precarious social position.
Highly precarious.
A spinster of her age was expected to be pious, quiet, and devoted to charitable works.
And outwardly, Lizzie played that role perfectly, didn't she?
She really did. She was a Sunday school teacher at the affluent Central Congregational Church. She was active in the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
Very respectable.
She projected a flawless, impenetrable exterior of Victorian Protestant morality. She was exactly what Fall River society expected a wealthy man's unmarried daughter to be.
But internally, the reality was entirely different.
Oh, completely.
By all accounts, Lizzie had this fierce, burning desire to be part of the high society life up on the hill.
She wanted the lifestyle her father could afford.
She wanted the grand house, she wanted to host the elegant parties, she wanted the European summer vacations, and she knew her father had the financial means to provide all of that without even noticing a dent in his bank account.
But his stubborn, miserly character completely denied her access to the world she felt she deserved.
So she was essentially trapped. Trapped by the restrictive gender roles of the 1890s, trapped by her lack of independent income, and trapped inside this dark, outdated, hallwayless house, watching her future inheritance slowly bleed away.
Combine that long, simmering resentment with an unprecedented heat wave, and you have the recipe for violence.
Oh, the heat wave.
The week leading up to the murders in early August was incredibly hot, even for New England. And the physical state of the household mirrored the psychological toxicity.
Everyone got sick.
Several days before the murders, almost everyone in the house became violently ill.
Right, the infamous mutton.
Yes, the mutton.
So Andrew had bought a large quantity of mutton, and in his typical frugality, he insisted they keep eating it day after day, even as it sat in the icebox during a blistering heat wave.
Which is just a terrible idea.
Disgusting. And the entire household was stricken with what they assumed was severe food poisoning. Andrew was vomiting. Abby was bedridden. Bridget, the maid, was desperately sick.
Everyone was physically incapacitated.
Except Lizzie.
Except Lizzie. And Lizzie's lack of illness is a fascinating anomaly, especially given her activities the day before the murders.
Okay, this is where it gets crazy.
On Wednesday, August 3rd, while the rest of the house was recovering from this violent stomach ailment, Lizzie left the house. She walked to a local pharmacy run by a man named Eli Bentz, and she attempted to purchase prussic acid.
Let's pause here because this is where the chemical reality is absolutely crucial.
It is.
Prussic acid is an archaic name for hydrogen cyanide.
Yes.
It is not a household cleaner. It is a highly lethal, incredibly fast-acting poison that interferes with the body's ability to use oxygen. It smells faintly of bitter almonds, and even a tiny dose can cause rapid asphyxiation and death.
It is extremely dangerous stuff.
And Lizzie walks into this pharmacy and asks for this deadly chemical, claiming she needs it to clean a sealskin cape.
Which the pharmacist, Eli Bentz, immediately recognizes as a red flag. Prussic acid was occasionally used as a fumigant for pests, but it was not a standard garment cleaner. He informs her that it is a restricted substance and refuses to sell it to her without a doctor's prescription.
But she doesn't back down.
No, Lizzie pushes back. She insists she has bought it there before for this exact purpose. But Bentz holds his ground and flat out refuses the sale. Frustrated, Lizzie leaves the pharmacy empty-handed.
This detail is staggering. Less than 24 hours after she tries to buy one of the most lethal poisons available over the counter, her father and stepmother are brutally murdered.
The timing is just...
It forces us to look at the timeline of the following day, Thursday, August 4, 1892.
Because if you want to understand why this case is so confounding, you have to track the movements of every single person in that house minute by minute.
So let's do it. Let's walk through that morning.
Okay, the timeline of August 4th is really the crux of the entire mystery. The morning begins early. Around 6:30 a.m., Andrew and Abby come downstairs for breakfast.
Okay.
Bridget Sullivan, the maid,
Whom the family dismissively called Maggie. Right?
yes, simply because that was the name of their previous maid, which shows you the respect they had for her.
Unbelievable.
So Bridget is already awake and preparing the meal. Joining them at the table is John Vinicum Morse.
Who is he?
He is Andrew's brother-in-law from his first marriage, so Lizzie and Emma's uncle. He had arrived the previous afternoon for a surprise visit and spent the night in the upstairs guest room.
So they eat breakfast. And Lizzie doesn't join them, maintaining her usual avoidance.
Exactly. At approximately 8:45 a.m., John Morse leaves the house to visit other relatives across town.
Which is a critical departure because it removes an adult male from the premises.
Right. A few minutes later, right around 9:00 a.m., Abby gives Bridget her chores for the day. Despite the oppressive heat already building, Abby tells Bridget to go outside and wash the exterior windows of the house.
So Bridget is outside.
Bridget is outside, and this instruction from Abby is the catalyst that empties the interior of the house of almost all activity. With Bridget outside, hauling water and scrubbing glass, Abby Borden heads upstairs.
And she goes into the guest room, the room John Morse had just vacated.
Presumably to make the bed and change the pillowcases.
And this is where the timeline plunges into pure nightmare.
Oh, Dennis.
Sometime between 9:00 a.m. and 9:30 a.m., while she is smoothing the sheets on the guest bed, Abby Borden is attacked.
Yes.
She is struck in the head with a heavy, sharp-edged weapon, widely believed to be a hatchet. She is struck 19 times.
19.
Let's look at the medical examiner's report because it tells a story of terrifying ferocity. The examiner determined that the very first blow struck her on the side of the head above the ear. It was a catastrophic strike that felled her instantly. She dropped to the floor, face down, and then the attacker stood over her and delivered 18 more blows to the back of her head and neck.
The psychology of those wounds cannot be overstated.
It's so brutal.
If the first blow incapacitated her and likely killed her, the subsequent 18 strikes serve absolutely no functional purpose. That is not the work of a burglar surprised in the act. A burglar hits you once to stop you from screaming, then runs.
Yeah, exactly.
This was an act of profound, deeply personal overkill. Whoever stood over Abby Borden and swung that blade 18 additional times was operating from a place of unadulterated volcanic rage. It was an execution fueled by decades of hatred.
And then the house goes quiet.
Nothing.
This is the part that I cannot wrap my head around. The killer has just unleashed this frenzy of violence. Blood is pooled on the floor of the guest room. And then, for an hour and a half, absolutely nothing happens.
The timeline just pauses.
The next major event doesn't occur until 10:45 a.m. when Andrew Borden returns from his morning business in the city.
Right.
He walks up to his own front door, puts his key in the lock, and finds that it isn't just locked, it is bolted and triple locked from the inside.
Which was highly irregular. During the day, the door might be locked, but the interior bolts and chains were rarely engaged unless the house was secured for the night.
So Andrew is standing there knocking.
And Bridget, who is still outside dealing with the windows, hears him. She comes to the front door, puts her key in, and struggles with the interior locks.
Because it's bolted from the inside.
Exactly. As she is fumbling with the heavy door, she lets out a frustrated curse. And at that exact moment, Bridget later testifies, she hears Lizzie softly laughing from the top of the stairs inside the house.
Lizzie is at the top of the stairs looking down at the front door laughing.
While her stepmother is lying butchered in the guest room just feet away from her.
It is so chilling.
Andrew finally gets inside. He goes into the sitting room and, oblivious to the slaughter upstairs, settles down on the sofa. It was his routine to take a short nap on hot mornings.
Okay.
Meanwhile, around 11 a.m., Bridget finishes her window washing. She is completely exhausted from the heavy labor in the August heat, and she tells Lizzie she is going upstairs to her attic bedroom to rest.
Which leaves Andrew Borden entirely vulnerable.
He is asleep on the sitting room sofa, and at approximately 11:10 a.m., the killer strikes again. Andrew is attacked with the same weapon. He is struck 11 times in the face and head. The violence is so severe, so extreme, that his left eye is completely bisected.
I read the forensic notes on Andrew's murder, and they are so disturbing.
They are grim.
The angle of the cuts and the defensive posture indicate something really terrible. The medical examiner concluded that Andrew was actually alive when the attack began.
He woke up.
He'd apparently woken up as the killer approached, and he turned his head toward the attacker just as the first blade came down.
So he saw them.
He saw who was holding the hatchet. But he had no time to raise his hands in defense.
10 minutes later, at 11:15 a.m., Lizzie Borden goes to the bottom of the back stairs and calls up to the maid. She shouts, "Maggie, come down quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him."
Okay, stop right there. Because when you step back and look at this sequence of events, it presents two massive, almost insurmountable problems for the theory that a random intruder committed these murders.
Oh, definitely.
The first problem is the 90-minute gap. Could an intruder really hide in a house with no hallways for 90 minutes without Lizzie or Bridget noticing?
The 90-minute gap is the ultimate stumbling block for the intruder theory. Think about the logistics. A random killer enters the house around 9:00 a.m., sneaks upstairs, and viciously murders Abby. At this point, the intruder is covered in blood and has just made a tremendous amount of noise in a creaky wooden house.
Right, you'd think they'd bolt.
The logical move for a criminal is to flee immediately. Instead, we are asked to believe that this intruder hid in the sweltering house.
Possibly in a closet.
Or under a bed, mere feet from a bleeding corpse, and waited in total silence for an hour and a half. They waited patiently for the master of the house to return.
And to add to that, they waited while Lizzie was supposedly wandering around the house and while Bridget was constantly moving around the perimeter washing windows.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the second massive problem. The locked house.
The triple lock door.
Whoever did this had to bypass a house that was securely locked from the inside. They had to navigate a floor plan with no hallways, commit the first incredibly messy murder, wait 90 minutes in absolute silence, creep downstairs to commit the second murder, and then vanish into thin air, leaving the doors locked behind them.
It is physically audacious. It defies common sense.
It totally does.
What's fascinating here is, furthermore, look at the contrasting psychology of the two sets of wounds.
Right.
You have 19 frenzied overkill blows to Abby, contrasting with 11 comparatively precise, efficient blows to Andrew.
So what does that tell us?
Whoever killed Abby possessed an immense, uncontainable hatred for her. Whoever killed Andrew was simply executing a necessary follow-through to secure an outcome.
Like an inheritance.
Exactly, likely an inheritance. When you combine the specific psychology of the wounds with the physical impossibility of a hidden intruder waiting 90 minutes in a locked house, the profile of the killer narrows to a microscopic point.
So with a timeline that tight and a crime scene that confined, you would expect the police to arrive and immediately secure a mountain of physical evidence.
You would hope so.
But this brings us to the investigation. And if you think the timeline is mind-boggling, wait until you see how late 19th century law enforcement handled a crime scene in a millionaire's living room.
Well, we have to understand the reality of the Fall River Police Department in 1892.
Right.
This was a municipal force whose primary duties involved breaking up tavern brawls, arresting petty thieves, and managing public drunkenness.
Not complex homicides.
They had virtually zero experience with complex homicide investigations and absolutely zero experience dealing with a crime of this staggering brutality inside the home of one of the city's wealthiest, most powerful citizens.
Right. There's an immediate class dynamic at play.
Oh, completely.
And police arrive, and they are acutely aware that they are standing in Andrew Borden's house. They are deferential.
They're treading lightly.
They don't immediately tear the place apart looking for bloody clothes because they are intimidated by the social standing of the victims and the surviving daughters.
And let's talk about the forensics of 1892. This wasn't the era of luminol and DNA testing.
Forensic science was in its absolute infancy.
Right. If police found a dark stain on a piece of wood or fabric in 1892, they couldn't just swab it and run it through a lab to confirm it was human blood.
They just kind of eyeballed it.
They largely relied on visual inspection. If a stain looked like rust or brown paint or animal blood, they often just took the suspect's word for it.
That is wild.
And they couldn't establish an exact time of death using liver temperature or rigor mortis with the precision we have today. They relied on observing the coagulation of the blood and stomach contents.
So the police are searching this dark, stifling house, mostly with their eyes in their hands. And obviously, priority number one is finding the murder weapon.
The hatchet.
Right. They search the cellar, which is full of typical tools for a 19th century home, and they find a very suspicious item in a box of ashes.
Okay.
It is a 3.5-pound claw head hatchet, but the handle has been freshly broken off close to the metal head.
Interesting.
And the metal itself appears to have been recently aggressively rubbed with ash, almost as if someone was tricked to artificially age it or dry it out after washing it.
The police seize this hatchet head, but here is the critical failure. The handle itself, the wooden piece that would theoretically have absorbed the killer's sweat and the victim's blood, is completely missing.
They never found it.
The police searched the entire property and never locate it. Without the handle, the hatchet head becomes a massive, highly contested question mark.
Because you can't test the wood for blood.
Exactly. The prosecution would later insist this was the weapon, while the defense would argue it was far too heavy to produce the clean, precise cuts found on Andrew's skull.
But the missing hatchet handle isn't the only piece of physical evidence that mysteriously vanishes.
No, it's not.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I was looking at the timeline of the days immediately following the murder, and this specific incident is just astounding.
Oh, the dress.
The dress. It's Sunday morning, 3 days after the murders. The police have been in and out of the house. The entire city is in an uproar.
Yeah.
An official police inquest is looming.
Tensions are high.
Very high. A neighbor named Alice Russell has moved into the house to comfort Lizzie and Emma. Alice walks into the kitchen on Sunday morning, and she catches Lizzie Borden standing over the coal stove, actively tearing apart a blue Bedford cord dress and burning it in the fire.
Alice Russell is stunned.
Yeah.
She reportedly says to Lizzie, "I wouldn't do that if I were you. The police might want to see it."
And what does Lizzie say?
Lizzie casually responds that the dress was covered in brown paint she got on it weeks ago while painting a baseboard, and she was simply getting rid of a ruined garment.
I mean, to put this in modern terms, this is the exact equivalent of someone frantically putting their hard drive into a microwave right as the homicide detectives are knocking on the front door.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. And then turning around and saying, oh, I was just optimizing my storage space. It was full of old files.
It's so blatant.
It is an action screaming with consciousness of guilt.
Eh.
How do the police not arrest her on the spot?
Because the police weren't in the room.
Yeah.
And Alice Russell, torn by loyalty and Victorian propriety, didn't immediately run to the authorities.
Wow.
By the time the police learned about the burned dress, the ashes were gone.
Unbelievable.
The prosecution firmly believed that Lizzie had committed the murders wearing that blue dress, perhaps protecting the rest of her clothing with an apron, and had hidden it in a closet while the police conducted their initial excessively polite searches of the wealthy home.
Right.
Once she felt the initial pressure ease, she destroyed the primary piece of physical evidence.
And without the bloody clothes, the police have to rely on interrogations.
Yes.
So they question Lizzie, and her alibis are a complete disaster. She cannot keep her story straight.
Not at all.
When they ask her where she was during the 90 minutes between Abby's death and Andrew's return, her narrative constantly shifts.
In one official statement, she claims she was in the kitchen reading a magazine. In another, she claims she was outside in the yard. But her most famous and most thoroughly dismantled alibi was her claim that she had gone out to the barn loft.
The barn.
She told police she went up to the loft to look for lead sinkers for an upcoming fishing trip. She said she was up there for 20 to 30 minutes eating pears and looking out the window.
Which, first of all, defies human logic.
How so?
It is a blistering August day. The heat index inside a tightly sealed wooden barn loft would be suffocating, easily over 100 degrees.
Absolutely.
The idea that a wealthy Victorian woman in a heavy corset and dress would voluntarily climb into an oven to look for fishing gear she didn't urgently need is absurd.
It makes no sense.
But more importantly, the police actually go out to the barn to verify her story. And what do they find in the loft?
This is the kicker. They find a thick, completely undisturbed layer of dust covering the floorboards.
No footprints.
There are no footprints. There is no disruption of the dust to indicate that anyone had walked around up there, let alone spent 20 minutes rummaging for lead sinkers.
Wow.
The physical evidence of the environment directly contradicted her statement.
So let's look at the board.
Let's review.
You have the attempt to buy lethal poison the day before. You have the physical impossibility of a hidden intruder waiting 90 minutes in a locked house.
Mm-hmm.
You have the suspect caught red-handed burning a dress 3 days later. And you have alibis that are easily proven false by the dust on the floor.
It looks bad.
If I'm listening to this, I'm thinking a conviction is an absolute foregone conclusion. But then we hit the legal proceedings.
The trial.
And I was reading the trial transcripts, and I was genuinely baffled by the judge's behavior. Why would a judge actively blindfold a jury?
To understand the judge's rulings, you really have to look at the legal and social framework of the 19th century.
Okay.
The legal system has strict procedural rules, and in this specific trial, those rules were interpreted in a way that overwhelmingly favored the defendant. The trial was presided over by a panel of 3 judges, led by Chief Justice Albert Mason. And they made 2 monumental, devastating rulings that completely gutted the prosecution's case before the jury even had a chance to deliberate.
Let's break those down, starting with the prussic acid.
Okay, so the prosecution wanted to call Eli Bentz, the pharmacist, to testify that Lizzie had attempted to purchase a highly lethal poison the day before the murders.
Which proves premeditation.
Exactly. It was crucial for establishing premeditation. It proved she was actively seeking a way to kill, even if she ultimately chose a different weapon.
Right.
But the defense argued that because the murder weapon was a hatchet, not poison, the testimony was irrelevant and highly prejudicial.
And the judge agreed.
The judges agreed with the defense. They ruled the pharmacist's testimony completely inadmissible.
Wow.
The jury was never allowed to hear that Lizzie Borden tried to buy prussic acid on August 3rd.
That is a staggering blow to the prosecution. But the second ruling is even worse. The inquest testimony? They threw out her entire inquest testimony. Now, Miranda writes, the right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, they didn't exist in 1892.
No, they didn't.
So what was the actual legal mechanism that allowed the judge to throw out her statements?
Well, while the modern Miranda warning didn't exist, the fundamental constitutional protection against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment certainly did.
Ah, okay.
During the initial police inquest, Lizzie was subjected to days of intense, grueling questioning. She was isolated, she was confused, she was likely medicated with morphine to calm her nerves, and most importantly, she did not have her defense attorney present in the room.
So they argued it was coercive.
The judges ruled that because she had essentially been treated as a prisoner during the inquest but had not been formally warned that her statements could be used against her, the entirety of her contradictory, damaging testimony was legally involuntary.
So they strike it from the record.
All of it.
I want to put the listener in the jury box for a second. You are sitting there, tasked with solving a horrific double murder. But the judge looks down at you and essentially says, you cannot consider the poison she tried to buy yesterday. And you cannot consider all the times she demonstrably lied to the police about where she was.
Right.
You are staring at a circumstantial puzzle, and the judge has forcibly removed the biggest, most obvious corner pieces. You are left completely blind to the defendant's actual behavior.
Exactly. Without the poison and without the lies, what are the prosecutors left with?
Not much.
They have no murder weapon that can be definitively linked to the crime. They have no bloodstained clothing. They have no eyewitnesses.
Just the timeline.
They are left relying entirely on the logical deduction of the locked house and the timeline. And this evidentiary vacuum sets the stage perfectly for the trial of the century.
Because they have to rely on logic instead of hard evidence?
Because once logic and direct evidence are legally excluded from the courtroom, Victorian social norms step in and take the steering wheel.
The trial officially begins on June 5, 1893.
Yes.
They moved it to New Bedford, Massachusetts, specifically to avoid the intense local prejudice and gossip in Fall River. And it is an absolute, unprecedented media circus.
The biggest.
We're talking about the most heavily covered criminal trial in America since the conspirators of the Lincoln assassination were tried.
Wow.
Reporters are pouring in from all over the country. They are fighting for telegraph lines. And the spectator seats in the courtroom, they are packed wall to wall with the social elite of New England.
Everyone wanted to see it.
Wealthy women in their finest summer dresses, prominent politicians, everyone is there to treat this brutal tragedy as high society theater.
The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Hosea Knowlton and a young, brilliant attorney named William Moody, presented an incredibly tight, logical case.
Okay.
They laid out the timeline. They pointed out the sheer impossibility of an intruder hiding for 90 minutes. They established the locked doors. They brought in Alice Russell to testify about the burned Bedford court dress.
So they did a good job with what they had.
They established the deep, simmering hostility between Lizzie and Abby. They really built a cage of logic around Lizzie Borden.
But the defense team, led by former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson, saw that the prosecution lacked the bloody hatchet handle and the bloody clothes.
They saw the weakness.
And Governor Robinson drove a proverbial truck right through that gap in the evidence. He didn't really try to solve the timeline or explain how an intruder bypassed the locks.
Whoa, he deflected.
He masterfully pivoted the entire conversation away from facts and focused entirely on character, gender, and Victorian ideology.
This is where the concept of cognitive dissonance becomes the deciding factor in the case.
Let's talk about the jury.
Look at the jury. It was composed of 12 middle-class Victorian men, farmers, tradesmen, respectable citizens of the 1890s.
Right.
Governor Robinson stood in front of them, gestured towards Lizzie Borden, and essentially asked them to look at her. Here was a respectable, wealthy, church-going, charity-working Protestant woman. Robinson argued that a woman of her refined breeding and delicate nature was physically, morally, and spiritually incapable of swinging a heavy hatchet 30 times to butcher 2 human beings.
And cleaning herself up afterwards.
And miraculously cleaning herself up so perfectly that no blood was found on her skin or hair minutes later.
So what does this all mean? It is wild to think about from a modern perspective. The defense essentially won by pointing at the defendant and saying, look at her dress. She teaches Sunday school. She is a lady. Therefore, it is biologically impossible for her to be a monster.
And we have to understand that the jury bought it because it aligned perfectly with their worldview.
How so?
In Victorian gender ideology, upper-class women were viewed as inherently fragile, morally pure, and governed by delicate sensibilities.
Upper class being the key phrase.
Now, notice I said upper-class women. The Victorian men had no problem believing that poor women, immigrant women, or working-class women were capable of violence or brute strength.
Oh, of course.
But a woman of Lizzie's social standing, to convict Lizzie Borden of such a savage, blood-soaked, frenzied crime would have required those 12 men to completely dismantle their entire foundational belief system about the nature of women and respectability.
They couldn't compute it. The cognitive dissonance was simply too loud.
Exactly.
If Lizzie was a butcher, then their wives and daughters could be butchers. It was a terrifying reality they refused to accept.
Precisely. They were psychologically unprepared to face that reality. So after a grueling trial, the jury retired to deliberate.
And how long did they take?
They deliberated for just 70 minutes.
Unbelievable.
Barely over an hour. And they returned to the courtroom with a verdict of not guilty.
Whoa.
The room erupted in wild applause. Women were cheering, men were weeping. By the strict legal standards of a circumstantial case that was missing the weapon and the confession, the jury wasn't necessarily legally wrong to acquit.
Right, the burden of proof is high for a reason.
But practically, historically, they were almost certainly wrong about the physical truth of what happened in that house.
The legal system of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts declared Lizzie Borden completely innocent.
Yes.
So if we are going to play by the jury's rules, we have to play the who else game.
Oh, the alternative theories.
Yeah, if we accept the premise that Lizzie didn't do it, we have to look at the other people in the orbit of 92 2nd Street.
Yeah.
Who else could have possibly swung that hatchet? Over the last 134 years, theorists have obsessed over a handful of alternative suspects.
The alternative theories are fascinating because they reveal how desperately human beings want to solve a puzzle when the obvious, logical answer is legally denied to them.
So let's go through them. Who's first?
Let's start with John Vinicum Morse, the uncle who stayed over the night before.
Okay.
He left the house at 8:45 a.m., just minutes before Abby was murdered. He had ongoing financial dealings with Andrew that had reportedly soured, so there is a theoretical financial motive.
And what about his alibi?
Well, his alibi was incredibly, almost unnaturally specific. He could account for his movements minute by minute, recalling the exact badge number of the streetcar conductor he rode with, and naming specific relatives he spoke to across town.
That's a little too perfect.
To some modern investigators, an alibi that rehearsed, is inherently suspicious.
That's the classic overcompensation. But the problem is, he had independent witnesses completely backing up that overly perfect alibi.
Right, he did.
The streetcar conductor confirmed he was there. The relatives confirmed he was drinking tea with them across town when Andrew was being killed. The police cleared him because he physically couldn't be in two places at once.
Exactly. Then there's the William Borden theory.
William Borden. Who is that?
William Borden is a persistent fringe theory. The idea is that Andrew Borden had an illegitimate son named William who was living in the area.
Oh, I see.
The theory posits that William was enraged that he wasn't acknowledged by his wealthy father or included in the inheritance. He supposedly shows up on the morning of August 4th, demands money, gets rejected, and goes on a psychotic axe rampage.
But let's be real about William Borden. The evidence that this man even existed, let alone had a relationship with Andrew, let alone committed a double murder, is incredibly thin.
Very thin.
It relies on rumor and heavily disputed local lore. Serious historians and criminologists generally toss this theory out because it requires inventing a phantom to solve a physical problem.
Which brings us to a much more grounded, complex alternative suspect. The maid, Bridget Sullivan.
Maggie.
Right, Bridget. If we were looking for someone who was physically present, Bridget is the only other option. She was on the property the entire time.
Yes, she was.
She was unobserved washing the exterior windows when Abby was killed, and she was alone in her attic room when Andrew was killed.
I am going to play devil's advocate here, because if you strip away the Victorian class bias, Bridget actually has a compelling alternate case.
Let's hear it.
Think about the physical realities. She is the invisible servant.
Yeah.
Wealthy Victorian families barely paid attention to their staff. They were practically part of the furniture.
That is very true.
She has total, unquestioned access to the house. She knows the daily routines. She has the physical strength from years of grueling manual labor to swing a heavy hatchet. And she has motive. She's an Irish immigrant servant being asked to do hard labor in a heavy dress during a suffocating heat wave while sick with food poisoning, carrying the general crushing class resentment that permeated a wealthy, oppressive household.
Right.
She could slip in and out unnoticed because her presence in any room is expected.
It is a mathematically compelling narrative.
Right.
However, her subsequent life behavior strongly contradicts the psychology of a spree killer.
How so?
After the trial, Bridget Sullivan took her savings, moved away from Fall River, eventually returned to Ireland for a time, and then moved to Montana. Yes, she lived a completely quiet, unremarkable, lawful life until she died in 1948. She never sought fame, she never capitalized on the event, and most importantly, despite decades of rumors, she never gave a deathbed confession.
Okay, that's a good point.
People who snap and commit sudden, rage-fueled double-axe murders rarely go on to live 60 years of total, placid obscurity without ever slipping up or unburdening their conscience.
That is a very fair point.
Yeah.
You don't usually chop two people's heads to pieces and then just quietly go work on a farm in Montana for the rest of your life.
No, you don't.
So if it wasn't Morris, wasn't William, and wasn't Bridget,
Yeah.
who's left?
Emma Borden, the older sister.
But she wasn't even there.
Right. We must clarify that Emma was physically in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, 15 miles away, visiting friends during the time of the murders. Her physical alibi is ironclad. She could not have swung the hatchet.
So how is she a suspect?
However, some theorists propose she was the intellectual mastermind of the crime. The theory is that Emma and Lizzie planned the murders together to secure their inheritance before Abby's family could take it all. Emma ensured she had a rock-solid alibi out of town, while Lizzie remained behind to do the bloody work.
But wait, if they planned it together and successfully pulled off the perfect crime, why the extreme hostility later in life?
The split.
Yeah, because we know that Emma and Lizzie lived together as wealthy heiresses at their new mansion for years after the acquittal. But then, in 1905, they had this massive, mysterious falling out. Emma literally packed her bags, moved out of the house, and never spoke a single word to Lizzie again for the rest of their lives.
This raises an important question. The 1905 split is one of the most revealing postscript details of the entire saga. We have to look at what triggered it.
What happened?
Historical context suggests it was tied to Lizzie's controversial relationship with a young bohemian actress named Nance O'Neill.
An actress.
Yes. Lizzie was showering this actress with expensive gifts, hosting loud late-night parties, and essentially living a lifestyle that deeply offended Emma's rigid Victorian sensibilities. The rumors of a scandalous, potentially romantic relationship between Lizzie and Nance O'Neill brought immense social pressure to the house.
So Emma leaves because of a social scandal.
It is likely deeper than just a scandal. The intense arguments over Nance O'Neill may have led to a slip of the tongue.
Oh, wow.
Is Emma packing her bags the behavior of a co-conspirator angry about a party? Or is it the behavior of an older sister who stood by her sibling through a horrific murder trial, truly believing in her innocence, only to discover something in the heat of a 1905 argument?
A drop detail.
A hidden truth, a dropped detail, a terrifying realization that made her suddenly understand exactly what Lizzie had truly done 13 years prior.
Oh, my God.
A realization so horrifying that she had to flee the house and sever all contact immediately to save her own soul.
That is absolutely chilling to think about, that Emma lived with the butcher for a decade before realizing it.
It really is.
Regardless of who actually swung the axe, the jury's decision that day birthed a cultural phenomenon. It created an echo that completely outlived everyone involved. I want to talk about the afterlife of this case, because the dark tourism and the folklore aspect of the Borden murders is wild.
It's a huge part of the legacy. Lizzie Borden was legally acquitted by the state, but she was entirely condemned by society.
They shunned her.
The high society of Fall River, the church groups, the respectable circles she so desperately wanted to lead, they completely ostracized her.
But she had the money now.
Right. The inheritance was hers. So she bought Maplecroft, the massive, beautiful Queen Anne mansion on the hill she had always dreamed of. She used the bloody inheritance she received because her father and stepmother were dead to finally buy her way into the physical space of the elite, even if they refused to speak to her.
And while she's living up on the hill in her sprawling mansion, the culture below is processing the trauma of the unsolved murders through folklore.
The nursery rhyme.
Yes. The famous jump rope rhyme is born. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Everyone knows it.
It spread across schoolyards all over the country. It's ironic because the rhyme gets the numbers completely wrong. Abby took 19 whacks, Andrew took 11, not 40 and 41, but the facts didn't matter. The rhyme cemented Lizzie in the public consciousness forever as a mythological monster.
And that cultural obsession never faded. It only mutated.
Yeah, the dark tourism.
Today, the actual house at 92 2nd Street is a booked solid bed and breakfast. You can literally pay money to travel to Fall River and sleep in the very rooms where Abby and Andrew were butchered.
That is so morbid.
The current owners have meticulously preserved the original Victorian layout. There is even a replica of the Victorian sitting room sofa placed in the exact spot where Andrew's eye was cut in half, where guests posed for photographs.
The modern obsession with true crime is so bizarre when you take a step back and really look at it. People are eagerly planning their summer vacations, packing their bags, and driving to Massachusetts just so they can eat eggs and toast in a dining room, mere steps away from where a senior citizen was brutally slaughtered.
It's definitely a unique choice of vacation.
And of course, where there's a preserved murder house, there are inevitably ghosts.
Right. The paranormal documentation at the Borden house is extensive and heavily commercialized.
What do people say happens there?
Guests and paranormal investigators regularly report inexplicable cold spots, particularly in the sitting room and the upstairs guest room where Abby fell. There are multiple independent reports of an apparition of a Victorian woman dressed in 1890s clothing standing near the bed in Abby's room.
Spooky.
And most unsettlingly, there are frequent corroborated reports of the sound of an older woman weeping uncontrollably in the early pre-dawn hours of the morning.
Okay, whether you personally believe in ghosts or you think it's all creaky floorboards and suggestion, that is terrifying to listen to in the dark.
It is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect sense why this specific location is supposedly haunted and why that nursery rhyme exists in the first place.
Why do you think that is?
They are societal coping mechanisms. When the established justice system completely fails to provide a satisfying, logical, and moral conclusion to an unspeakable horror, culture steps in to fill the void.
So we make up ghost stories.
Exactly. We create folklore. We create ghost stories. Human beings have an innate need for justice. We need the universe to balance the scales, even if the courts absolutely refuse to. The haunting of the Borden house is society's way of demanding that a consequence exists for a crime that went legally unpunished.
That is a profound way to look at it. It really brings us back to the cold, hard facts of the people themselves, outside the folklore.
Yes.
Lizzie Borden lived out her days in immense, luxurious wealth, but in total isolation. She died in 1927 at the age of 66.
And Emma?
Her sister Emma, the one who walked away in 1905 and never spoke to her again, died a mere 10 days later in New Hampshire. They took whatever truth they knew to the grave. To this day, despite all the books, all the deep dives, all the forensic reviews, the case remains officially, legally unsolved.
It is the ultimate historical contradiction.
It really is.
You have two people brutally killed in a locked house. You have one undeniable, glaringly obvious prime suspect with a clear financial motive, the physical means, and the exclusive opportunity. You have a jury of 12 men who looked at all of that and said no. And you have 134 years of history that looks at that exact same evidence and says yes.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the Borden files, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Because the story didn't actually end when Lizzie's heart stopped beating in 1927.
It didn't. After 34 years of living in Maplecroft, wealthy beyond imagination but completely ostracized by the community she had killed to join, Lizzie Borden passed away.
And where was she buried?
She was buried in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River. But she wasn't buried in some isolated, solitary grave. She and later Emma were buried in the exact same family plot as Andrew and Abby Borden.
Wait, really?
The historical source material notes a heartbreakingly grim reality. She was buried next to the father she despised because there was nowhere else to go.
Wow.
I want you to consider that for a moment. What if the real ghost story isn't the weeping apparition at the bed and breakfast?
What if it's the ending?
What if the ultimate punishment for Lizzie Borden wasn't a Victorian prison cell? What if her punishment was getting exactly what she thought she wanted, her father's immense money and the grand, beautiful house on the hill, only to realize it trapped her in a 34-year prison of total social isolation?
A life sentence.
A life sentence of lonely wealth, ending with her spending eternity in the very same dirt, inches away from the man she hated enough to butcher. Did she really get away with it? Or did she just spend 34 years building her own meticulously decorated purgatory?
Wow, that is something to sit with. Did she get away with it, or did she trap herself forever? We are going to leave you with that question to explore on your own. Keep questioning the things you think you know, keep looking past the jump rope rhymes, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.